everyone. Welcome to the inaugural Interop Workshop, Zen's attempt at providing some technical resource and answering questions with regard to healthcare data IT and healthcare data exchange. My name is Jim Benson. I'm the CEO of Zen Healthcare IT and one of the co-founders. We'll cover a little bit more of that in a few minutes, but I'm basically the host. I have about that much technical aspect compared to the rest of the Zen team, which is way farther than I am in that regard, and they keep me on the straight and narrow regularly. But again, the purpose of this forum is to be a technical resource and answer questions for those people that are in this space, and there's quite a bit to talk about with regard to it and how these entities make healthcare data flow back and forth between them safely and effectively. We're going to be covering anything that is technical in nature with regard to healthcare data exchange. More specifically, the integration engine aspects that are out there. Now at Zen, we use Mirth Connect, but there are others, and a lot of those technical aspects go across the integration engines, but we're going to focus on the tips, the tricks, the traps, those kind of things with regard to integration engines, and more in addition to many other topics. The big one that is going on in the marketplace right now is the national networks, Carequality, eHealth, and CommonWell, eHealth Exchange, and CommonWell, as well as the new and newly being minted QHENs under the TEFCA rules that are there. Some of those overlap quite a bit, but they are coming on strong, and we've got a lot of experience with regard to those as well. The purpose of the forum here, or at least how we're going to handle the forum, is we're going to be doing this really quite open mic and very loosely. While we've got some topics that we will be talking about, if there aren't any other particular questions, which we'll see in just a couple of minutes, the purpose of this is to have our clients, our competitors, people interested in the marketplace, people that do run the exchanges, and anybody else that's in this space to join us for an interesting conversation, open mic, be a contributor to not only the answers and the debate there too, but the questions that get asked. That's the whole purpose of this thing. So let's get right to the quick introductions that we have. As I mentioned, I'm the CEO of Zen Healthcare IT. This is the second healthcare IT related company that my partner Marilee and I have started, and we are very thrilled to be surrounded by and lucky enough to know some really talented people in this space with an awful lot of experience on it that make us look quite good, actually. That's a great. We have a lot of fun doing it, even though we all work very hard at that. One of them is with me here today, and this is predominantly Ron's gig going forward as we do this week over week. Ron Wilson is with us. Ron he gave me a little bio here, so I'm going to read from it just a little bit. While having a long history in the IT space overall, and we're both showing our age here a little bit with some of these things. He moved into the healthcare IT space in 2010. So yeah, that was about 14 years ago here right now. Spent the first 6 years or so of it in the behavioral health space. He picked an easy one to start with, go figure. A lot of security aspects to it that went there, and he built a team, went through meaningful use, 1 and 2 certifications with the particular software that he was working with, dealt with a lot of client issues, and you know what those folks can throw at you from time to time. Got lab certified for the EMR, SureScripts, number of other things. dealt with building an awful lot of CCDs, and then for anybody that has done CCDAs, and anybody who's done that knows that that certifies you as being even needing a little behavioral health aspect, I'm sure. And we were fortunate enough at Zen to get Ron in 2016. He's got a wealth of Mirth Connect experience, and we started at that point building out what was to become our flavor of the interoperability space called Gemini. He's the architect behind that, and while that is a big claim to fame, his biggest accomplishment as being the solution architect, really the fundamental architect behind our Stargate, which is the exchange, the IHE gateway exchange that we use for getting onto the national networks and for IHE data exchange, obviously. I'll give you just a quick version of Zen, so it'll go into what Ron is going to be talking about here. Zen uses, like a lot of people do, open source tools. Postgres is a database. Mirth Connect, which is an open source tool, unless you want to, you need to buy the other pieces of it. We use for the IHE gateway a very modified version of what used to be the Big Connect gateway. Overall, I'll let Ron elaborate on that. And Ron, welcome. Thank you for joining me on this overall. If I gotten anything wrong, correct me.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. It's great to talk to people today and kind of start to share some of our background history, successes, failures, all the good things that happen in this space. No, I think you covered it pretty good. When we talk about the age thing, my IT career goes back to 9-track tapes and punch cards, just to give some people some perspective. I spent quite a few years in the fintech business, or what was then the fintech business. It wasn't very tech, frankly. But Zen is an interesting company. We get brought in to do very complex problem solving. And that's really given us an opportunity to build some solutions and learn effectively how not to do things, and then how to do things better, or more correctly, or more accurately. And that's one of the best things about my job at Zen is the ability to learn something every day. At being nearly 60 years old now, I fail to go a day without somebody somewhere teaching me something, which makes it exciting. Sometimes I don't want to learn it, but I have to, and but it does kind of fit the narrative. Then Jim mentioned some of our other technical staff and resources that we have. It's really exciting to be a graybeard and have young, intelligent, technical staff, team members. It's exciting to work with them and try to mentor them with all of those skeletons and stub toes from over the years. So we thought this would be good to kind of help people in the marketplace navigate some of these working issues, whether it's related to a Zen product or not. Hopefully we can give you guys some tips and tricks and how to manage your own environment or make decisions to look at other solutions that may scale better. So thanks, Jim.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. Like we're doing here, it's going to be very interactive. For those of you who may be watching this recording, I affectionately refer to this as Stump the Chump. So like I said, we're going to try to be very interactive.
I'm the chump.
And he's the chump. Just to be perfectly clear, we're going to see if we can. Hopefully, somebody will come up with some stuff and see him squirm a little bit. It's kind of fun every now and then to do that. It's tough to do. It's tough to do. All right, so we're going to get into the, as Ron will say to me many times, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this here right away. I mentioned in the introduction the national networks. There's an awful lot of characteristics of data interoperability overall, point-to-point connections, and I think anybody who is crazy enough to actually attend this knows that there's a lot to it. But one of the areas that we have had a big focus on and be able, and as a result of, like you said, Ron, we've learned an awful lot of good things, and some of it has been really by trial and error and bashing our head into different things in the national networks. So I wanted to kind of ask you, and again, let's say from a technical standpoint, what are the national networks? It's my understanding that one of them is, let's talk about what they are. Carequality, CommonWell, and eHealth Exchange are the three major networks that are out there today. We're going to take the QHENs from under TEFCA and set them aside for just a few minutes, unless you bring them into the discussion yourself. But if you will, from a technical standpoint, talk a little bit about each one of those three. What are they? What's their purpose? How are they the same? How are they different?
Certainly. So back in 2008, under the Affordable Care Act, there was an interest in sharing data nationally. And IHE, the organization that is kind of the overarching oversight body to the technical framework, started to develop a mechanism to exchange data. XDS, XDM, XCA, these are all various elements of message transactions and exchanging data. From that, there were entities that started to broker data sharing agreements so that they could have a common ground on rules of the road, who could do what were we going to do, and how would they support each other relative to that. And so we started to see these national networks develop: Carequality, eHealth Exchange, and CommonWell. And of course, there's always some form of a competitive component to this. Who's going to be better? Many other reasons were in play, some of which were business related, others were technology related. But effectively, we ended up with these three disparate networks based upon the underlying IHE technical framework, meaning we were using these technical specifications. If you know about ANSI or ISO, right? There's an entity that makes rules and says you should do X with Y, and if everyone follows those rules, then everyone knows the roadmap, and that's what IHE does in the framework. That's what gives us our message structures, our security models, these types of things. The networks then started to embellish that and overlay some of their own rules. eHex, as an example, has some rules that Carequality doesn't have. Carequality has some embellishments that don't materially affect eHex, but they're a little different. In the Carequality network, we now have a concept of an on behalf of entry. That's not supported in the eHex network today. The eHex network is now producing or publishing a sub-participant model, which is different than the on behalf of model. So you kind of have these, I would say, dialects or regional kind of concepts, even though they're not regional. Most of these entities have locations across the country. eHex was generally the large health systems and the HIEs. Carequality was the providers and the other types of entities from a point of care perspective. That is evolving today. In the past 2 years, those lines are getting very blurred, but there's still some synergies there that are that way. And CommonWell, although I work with them a lot, I don't know a lot about their history in particular, but that is today where we find the government entities, the DoD, the VA, Social Security Administration. They're in the CommonWell network, and many other hospital systems are also in the CommonWell network, along with providers. So that's kind of a mix or a blend, CommonWell is, versus kind of provider-based only and hospital system, health system, HIEs. And so it's kind of a crossover of all three. But
So,
yet all of
so
these networks are now interconnected is
yeah.
what it boils down to, where we've crossed the borders and the barriers, and they're all interconnected today.
So if we've got this thing called IHE and it's the standards that everybody's using, obviously in today's world that produces APIs. Everybody's talking the same language. This is simple. What's the big deal?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, I kind of made light of some of the distinctions between the networks and the technical components of them, but that is really the big deal because it's all SOAP based today. IHE today is all 1990s technical technology it's moved, but I think the last SAML assertion update was 2004. Okay, so these are all web services, SOAP-based web services, older technologies that are proven, hardcore, safe, stable, which is the reason they persist, is because it works. It's a hammer. You don't need to throw a hammer out and buy a new one. You just keep using it. So that's the benefit of it.
But
Downside.
expound on that just a little bit more. Why isn't there a new thing with an API that just goes, well, why would you use that old stuff?
Well, they're trying to do that today, and they've been trying to do that with the TEFCA initiative and FHIR-based data exchange. So it's coming. The real working issue is that you've got large technology platforms, Epic, Cerner, NextGen, Athena, ECW. Athena has 10,000 providers on Carequality. They may have, I don't know, 20,000 providers in their ecosystem. It's a lot of material change to go affect and go, throw the baby out and, put a new one in place. So there's been some reluctance, with time, but there's also, the desire to move forward with more modern technologies. But this ship is big and it's slow and it's hard to turn, and it's going to continue. And, relative to that, Zen in my work on Stargate could kind of have that vision that it is a huge ship. There are large entities behind the scenes just trying to keep their day-to-day operations and features and functions working, not this little component that's running lights out in the back office of the EMR or the EHR. And they were going to be slow to migrate to FHIR, or it was going to be very, very pointed implementation methodology. We'll do this for payers. We'll do this over here because it's net new. We don't want to turn the apple cart over on what we know works. So the concept of what I did in Stargate was abstract all of that IHE hyperboil that's under the covers to a REST API implementation, so that at some point we could abstract whether it was FHIR, IHE, point to point, some other side scenario to communicate. We're not a HISP. We don't intend to be a HISP. The level of engagement to be a HISP is fairly high. But Stargate, the way it's designed, we could plug in a HISP connection behind the scenes and send via direct secure messaging.
Okay.
And so
I wanted to interrupt you there. Pardon me for just a second, because you're going into HISPs and other things.
Yeah.
And, so we're covering an awful lot of territory there. A quick question: have you ever seen a healthcare standard sunset?
I actually have not seen a healthcare standard sunset yet.
I've never heard of one.
No. I mean, we see quite a bit of movement in the content, like CCDA, that's been around forever, or CDA, been around forever, but now we're at 2.1, right? We're not at 1.0 anymore, but not that long ago, we're at 1.0. So 10 years ago, we're at 1.0. We're just now at 2.1. And there weren't a whole lot of iterative releases of that in between. I think there were two, if I recall, maybe three, that significantly got deployed. So HL7, HL7's been around since the early 90s. We're now into I think, version 2.9 or 3.0, but labs are still stuck at 2.5. the lab interfaces are, and they just got forced to come forward from 231. So these things are long-lived and they're slow to change and slow to move. And it will continue to stay that way, as best I can tell, for the next at least 3 to 5 years. And then there's going to be this merged concept, right? Like I was saying, the abstraction layer that we're trying to create in Stargate, where, okay, this endpoint is only FHIR, and that's the only way we can talk to them. But to you, it stays the same. And we handle, oh, that goes out FHIR, this goes out IHE, right?
So to the technical folks that are the audience of this discussion overall, some of the stuff that you've covered there, they know. Some of the stuff they probably don't know the history of it. They're probably younger than you and me. But so to the uninitiated, it would go, well, if it's been around for that long, it should be fairly easy. But you just right there covered everything, from lab and imaging and primary care use cases, the immediacy of needing interfacing to an ambulance service versus cardiology versus cancer type of things that are not immediate in nature. They take they need history and build up things over time. So I think the use cases that are in the healthcare IT space are so varied, and those that have been established for a long time work well. The economies of being able to, let's all change to FHIR today. It's not a practical reality. FHIR is a great thing. It is going to help us quite a bit, but like you said, it's a big ship and it takes time to turn it.
Yeah. One of the big things that is, I think, high on the list, and the reason SOAP still lives, is the security protocol or the security mechanism, right? It's mutual TLS. There's a trusted cert. That trusted cert in the national networks is provisioned by the national networks. So you get a certificate from Carequality, you get a certificate from eHealth Exchange, and then CommonWell sits behind the Carequality implementation. And it's not that can't be done in FHIR, but it's different in a REST API. You typically are doing JWT with access tokens and other things. And yeah, there's a clear roadmap from a technical perspective on how that's going to work. And it's a situation where, to some degree, there's security by obfuscation in the SOAP. When you think about how many young people coming out of college today are familiar with SOAP and SAML, and have the expertise to find the holes in that and leverage them to gain access to data that they shouldn't have, versus a REST API or the REST API technology, right? All of them coming out of college for the past 10 years have done nothing but REST API. So it's very common to them. And I'm not saying obfuscation is a key element of security, but the less people understand it or know the core technology, the harder it is for them to, get into the inner workings and get access. So I think that's a key component. And the operational requirements to manage this trusted exchange framework, you got to do the certificate provisioning, you've got to do vetting of the partners, you got to have a core product that is known to produce valid transactional messaging. That all has to be net new in the FHIR space. Now, some of that operationally from a provisioning of certificates or, constructing the security components can be mirrored, but mechanically it's net new, right? Which is problematic when you think about a change like that, right? Right now, everyone knows exactly what happens in the national networks relative to getting an SSL certificate. Everyone knows when they expire. Everyone managing them so that they can get them replaced. And that is going to take time to perfect in the FHIR space and get everybody up to speed on how that works and why. And again, it's about trusted data exchange.
Right.
So you know, you think about an internal organization. Let's take a hospital system. You got a CEO, 70 years old, been running this hospital system for ages, fought to do this data exchange 15 years ago, period. We're not opening our records. We're not, no. That's our data, and we're going to protect patient data. They finally had to sign on to the concept of this whole IHE through training and education and comfort and security people. Well, now there's a net new one. It's a whole nother paradigm of accepting and trusting and understanding that it is secure, because nobody wants a PHI breach. But what administrator of a hospital system that has 5-6 million patient names in a system want to risk their last days of their career to some new technology that somebody didn't lock down because they missed a checkbox, right? So I think there's going to be some dragging of the feet relative to the FHIR on some of that stuff too.
Now, I did notice that you made a couple of old guy references there. You're accepting the present company here, I presume.
Mm-hmm.
Doing it. Okay, all right, good. Just want to make sure on that.
It may, there may even, I don't mean to disparage us older folks, but there may be some young folks too that say, hey, I just don't trust that. Yeah, I don't trust it yet.
Right.
There's not enough penetration of acceptance yet. It's like anything, look at the electric vehicle. It took years and years as those came out for people to really start to trust them. Now they're all over the place.
Yeah.
Now,
one of the things that you are addressing here is the multifaceted aspect of healthcare IT exchange. It is not just that, okay, there's a HL7v2 or that there is IHE profiled to kind of work. There are security aspects with each one of them, and they support different characteristics between them, and sometimes those overlap, sometimes they don't. So in order to be in the technical aspects of the healthcare data exchange in today's world, as they add additional functionalities and capabilities, and everybody is trying to go kicking and screaming into the 21st and beyond. The problem is that it adds to the complexity, not taking it away, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, it is totally. Today, I was looking at some documentation on some transactions that are in the IHE framework. The policy and the acceptance and conformance was released in 2017, and today there's about a 3% implementation paradigm in the networks. So for 7 years now, whatever that is, this message construct, this message data exchange methodology has been live, been available, and of the couple 100,000 endpoints that are out there, you could count them on your hand how many will actually support that transaction. Another corollary that hit me when you mentioned that was HL7 integrations. When I first started doing HL7 integrations, long ago, everything was done over a VPN. Oh, no, we're not doing that any other way but over a VPN.
Right.
The past 6 months, it's been nothing but we're not doing that any other way other than a VPN, right? They want to do mutual TLS. They want to do other types of methodologies to create HL7 connectivity. And it's due to all the overhead and management of it all, right? So it kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of these various problems that are in the national networks. And I think the next 3 to 5 years are going to just be riddled with change. It's just going to be change left and right, and which is good. But you've got to have that covering bridge kind of a setup, to get through it all, right?
Absolutely. And, to exemplify the change, I mean, the national networks are established. They've been out there. There's a lot of transactions going through them. And yet we have the advent now via TEFCA of the QHANs. Now, the purpose of this this discussion is to be much more technical to overall. And while they're coalescing very quickly into to real entities, that's still a bit of an unknown, is my understanding of the characteristics of them. Yeah, can you address any of the characteristics that are known at this point on the QHINs, or is it still just too early?
Well, on the QHIN side, there have been some proposed embellishments to messaging to better represent the hierarchy of a initiator, as an example, on the national networks. There has been an expanded level of what we call purpose of use, or from an initiator perspective, the use case in which you could query for data, or the business implementation of that data. And then there's a broader requirement coming from CMS and the ONC to enforce data sharing behind the TEFCA agreement, right? So the TEFCA agreement gives us a new operating agreement that is filling holes or gaps that are in the old national network agreements to broaden these sharing opportunities. One of which would be a patient use case, right? So a patient portal. I can see my own data, and I can transport that data as an individual to my providers, and I'm in the loop. I'm getting my own lab results. I'm getting CCDAs from events and so on. Others are related to payers and authorizations, right? Trying to automate the authorization process so that when you're having a procedure, you're not waiting for Bob at the clinic that you're going to make calls and call back, and trying to do that electronically. So TEFCA is kind of putting a broader umbrella over these use cases and fixing holes in the business agreement, which needed to occur. That was different than EHEX and Carequality. And so what we're seeing is the QHINs are coming out where they're members of EHEX or ultimately Carequality, and they're now operating under that new agreement. And it's the same folks. It's just, again, there's multiple tiers of problem statements here. There's the technical messaging, there's business agreements, there's implementation elements, what will get supported and what won't, these types of things. So that's what we're really seeing. And in the early phases here, the QHIN work, it's all IHE-based data exchange at the moment, for the most part. There are some pilots and some initial things going on in the payer market that are FHIR-based, but it's fairly limited today. And we just recently did some QHIN-based QHIN IHE-based transactions for a client of ours. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
I'll take a quick break and just remind the audience members that we have here. This is intended to be an open mic forum. It's not two guys talking, droning on and on that. I hope that people will come with questions or have them. So if you have something, please unmute yourself and insert yourself into the discussion. Happy to do that. Actually, we charge a lot of money for Ron's time, so this is a freebie for you. So take advantage of it. Very good. Let's talk a little bit more about the from a technical standpoint, what it takes to get on national networks. We know, and I can tell you firsthand, and you don't have to deal with this predominantly. There are obviously agreements. You mentioned them, data exchange and data sharing agreements that are really not negotiable with regard to them. That's the way they're standardized across their entire install base. And that's actually a really good thing. So there are a lot of business elements there, but from a technical standpoint, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, the importance of being able to test, and the different kind of tests that you have to go through to get on the network consist of what? Just from a high level, give us the overview of the process that it takes to do it.
Yeah, so between the two networks, Carequality has there's two different concepts in the networks that exist, and it's important to understand it from an early phase. In Carequality network, you can become an implementer. So you could be a technology vendor, Zen, And you get through the proofing of your core technology, and you become what's called an implementer. You then get kind of a fast track to onboard folks because you've done all of the heavy lifting to get somebody into the network with successful transactions consistently and so on.
Let me interject a quick question with regard to that, because I think this is right, and I think it's material. What you're talking about here when we're saying care quality is that care quality is a framework. It's an organization that promulgates a framework of how this is done, but it isn't actually a technical entity in and of itself, right? Am I saying that correctly?
You are. So basically, again, we go back to the IHE underlying technical framework from a specifications, message, semantics, form, function. And then care quality says, in this element or these elements, we want these values, okay, from a content perspective, as an example. And you need to support these transaction types out of the IHE framework. IHE framework has hundreds of transaction types, and care quality says we're going to support these 6 or 8, whatever it is, right? So with care quality, their onboarding process, there's no prescriptive testing or validation other than working with 3 implementers and getting 3 implementers to consume and exchange messaging with you and producing valid messages and sending those to care quality to sign off. And that can take a long time because you've got to find an implementer that's willing to work with you. And depending on how you're building your gateway, you may not have message conformance even close. And when you start to want to get Ron Wilson, as an example, to look at your dog food to say, no, you're not even close here. Can you go use the Gazelle ITP testing tool and work on validating your messaging? Gazelle what?
Right.
That's typically the answer I get, right? And one of the reasons Zen, as an example, opted to leverage BigConnect is it was based upon enterprise class Java implementation with CXF, XSDs, and message conformance rules and policies. So it kind of solved a problem for us. Adds a huge layer of complexity to it, but it solves a problem for us. Our messages are conformant in a general sense automatically.
No, time out for a second. What is this BigConnect, and can anybody get it?
You can get it. It's available. It's out there, but it's from
It's an open source tool.
Open source tool. Last time it was touched formally was in 2018, and there's a lot of movement that you'll have to make that concurrent compliant. Where this becomes an issue when you're getting onboarded is if you're using, let's just say you're using Python to do this, and you're not using a framework to do conformancy against an XSD out of the IHE framework. A lot of availability there for your messages to become very, very fluid and not conformant to the specification. Things like order of elements, sequences, they matter because there are other people, other implementers in the marketplace are using the XSDs, and the XSDs at a technical level say this element has to happen before this element, and if it doesn't, it's hot garbage. I'm going to throw it out.
And that's why you have to test with 3 different entities, because if those other 3 have been approved, so to speak, they all speak the same language, and they are all saying that, okay, yeah, you do speak the language and we understand you, is what you're talking about.
Yes. And so with eHealth Exchange, the paradigm is different. eHealth Exchange uses the Gazelle testing tool as an interactive validation and conformance checking solution. The Gazelle toolkit is used for what were called connectathons across the various healthcare specs, HL7, CCDA, XDS, XCA, XDM, and it is a framework engine that is open source that one could install and leverage to validate your object, whatever your object is, whether it's a CCDA, HL7 message, or a patient discovery request of IHE.
And these,
EHEX uses that tool, and you have to go through a very prescriptive set of tests and requirements, both for security, content, message conformance, message compliance, and you've got to submit all that to be reviewed. And there is no concept of an implementer, quote unquote, in EHEX. There are some other concepts that are very difficult to get with EHEX. Very difficult to get. You got to work real hard, and you got to do a lot of things a lot of times to get kind of past that. Every single one has to go through this Gazelle testing validation process. In Zen's world, Carequality onboarding took us 5 months, 6 months.
Right.
It was 2 or 3 people working diligently to work out the kinks and the bugs. And that was in our, what we called Stargate 1.0 version. And part of the reason we decided to migrate to the Big Connect and our own flavor of it was the working issues that we had in that process. And for 5 years now, we have been working off the Stargate IHE gateway that is based on Big Connect. And we will continue to do that for the near future, 3 to 5 years, depending on the FHIR disposition, right?
foreseeable future, yes.
Yes.
Because during that 5 or 6 months that you were talking about, more than once or twice, I questioned my judgment with regard to what we were doing there, because that was a lot. That was a big lift, but it was a very successful lift as well. It can be done, but it's a lot of work, folks. Before we go on here, you mentioned the Connectathon. And that was kind of embedded in the middle of your talking about that. Talk just a little bit about a Connectathon, and does that really play into onboarding with EHEX?
It can. Connectathons are orchestrated events for implementers of technology to get together in a party form or an event-based forum to exercise a product or a solution with other people at the same time with a very focused response model. When I said 6 months with Carequality, the reason it took 6 months with Carequality is we exchange a message with somebody, an implementer. Hey, can you check out this message? I sent it on Monday. And we would get a response next week on the Tuesday.
Yeah.
So it wasn't 6 months of every day for 6 hours. It was 6 months of playing email hockey, addressing a problem, and then doing the same thing with email hockey. A Connectathon changes that paradigm because typically they have Teams or Slack behind it, and you can look at features or functions that you're adding or that you're participating in, whether it's a FHIR Connectathon, an IHE Connectathon, an HL7 Connectathon, and they have all of these. And you're going to have people that are sitting at a desk, whether it's in their remote office or at the Connectathon facility, who have got a box wired up, and they're testing the same thing. And you're going to get real-time exchange of information. That was good, that was bad, that's hot garbage. And you can go fix it and hit them again, right away. So
it's a healthcare data exchange nerd party.
It is. It's like a big LAN party for Quake or whatever you would call it for graybeard nerds and their minions, frankly. And they're actually fun. We've done one. I did participate in an HL7 one ages ago, prior to my time at Zen, trying to perfect some things from the behavioral health EMR and proof them. And you could, like I said, I've used the Gazelle tool to validate HL7 messaging, CCDAs. I mean, I don't know how many times I almost broke a keyboard validating a CCDA in the Gazelle tool. I just was tired of it spitting out evil things to me, but it takes some time, but you get it figured out, and it's helpful. A lot of folks entering this space, they don't have that experience. They don't know that that's out there, and that's really what you should be using as your third-party unit test, quote unquote, right? Unit tests in software development are only as good as the test itself. If you don't know to test the order of a sequence in a SOAP envelope, then you're not going to pass it. If something else is doing that test and it fails, then that you need that check and balance, right? Eating your own dog food problem statement, right? You need a third party to help you validate you're right or wrong.
So I want to insert a little public service announcement here at this juncture, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because I know that you will. But when you're using the Gazelle tool, that is not to be used with real PHI.
Oh, no. That is a public server. I mean, unless you pull the open source, build it, and host it yourself, that's a public server, and everyone can see mostly everything. There are certain portions of it that do get locked down for configuration and those things with RBAC, especially in the SDS toolkit, just because there's endpoints and configurations there. But the patient manager, that's free and clear. You can see all of that. So yeah, and nearly everything in a connectathon is documented test cases, and they're generally very clearly documented, test patients, those kinds of things. And of course, we've got known test patients in the national networks. Robert Carson, Amy Davidson, the Big Connect Gateway had 18 or 19 test cases that were known that came out of the CMS ONC effort for that. So, yeah, but yeah, no PHI in that.
Yeah. So again, anybody that is watching this after the fact or interested in it and you haven't done it before, I just wanted to make sure to be very, very clear. These tools are great. They're available out there. If you need to, if you don't know where to find them or you can't find them, let one of us know. We'll be glad to steer you to them. But be very careful. Don't be testing with real data.
To your point too, Jim, another thing, especially if you're young in the space, whether you're a young company or a young engineer, these IHE messages, they're very complex, and, lots of folks grab them out of a log and start pushing them around. Right. And, depending upon the core technology, you can end up with 2 or 3 transactions messages in that data. And if you're doing that in a test environment that is also commingled in a client install, as an example, there's concurrent threads, there's all kinds of things. Yeah, there's risk there, right? So PHI is always first and foremost, right?
Be careful.
Yeah.
Know what you're doing or ask before you press enter, kind of thing. It's always good. Because the consequences are real, folks. Everybody's playing for keeps in this game. So it's
another element to the onboarding that I think is important to talk about. It's the after the onboarding. Again, you pick 3 implementers in the care quality space that you're going to talk to and get through. There's 35 implementers in the care quality space. There are little caveats along the way after you are live, quote unquote, that you will learn that can be painful. There are little idiosyncrasies with things like aggregate responders, enablement of directory entries, these kinds of things that will come out after you go live, frankly. Idiosyncrasy.
What you're saying is that just because you've gone live and you've passed the test once doesn't mean that the job is over.
Job's not over. When we started down this path years ago, we started learning substantial things that I've forgotten if it weren't enumerated in some documentation. Right now, it's just old hat. But they're just little dialect, operational distinctions in it with implementers, right? That they're not significant swings in the core messaging, but they do become germane to success or fail, found percentages, these kinds of things.
Let's talk about the various use cases that we have for the national networks. I'm kind of queuing this up. We're a little bit over time because I allowed for that time for Q&A. And Brian, Jessica, you haven't given me any questions yet, but I know that you will if you get them. Don't hesitate to break in. Some of the things that we're going to talk about in future versions of this, we're going to get away from a little bit of the high level, what is it that we're talking about, down into the meat and potatoes, the real technical aspects of it. And one of the characteristics that I think is valuable for us to at least tease for future editions of this is the use cases that are there. We touched on it earlier in the discussion, where if you are trying to support the communications back and forth between an ambulance and an ER, the use case is vastly different. And a patient's history that is there, the use case is vastly different than if you're an oncologist and you've got somebody who's going to be presenting in a scheduled appointment 3 or 5 days from now, or whatever the case happens to be. A lot of different use cases there. Are different use cases supported by these by the IHE profile and by the networks?
There are different use cases that are supported. There are technical document framework domains that are specific to taxonomies. It doesn't really change the underlying behavior of a message in particular, but there's some guidance and some direction from IHE for like radiology, oncology, cardiology. And it's more wrapped around workflow, I think, and then some distinctly unique elements that are there that could be leveraged. But in most cases, it's going to, the national networks work on you controlling data items in the messaging. So patient discovery message is fairly straightforward. It's patient demographics and some identifiers. You shoot it off to the endpoint. The endpoint says, yeah, I know Ron Wilson. Here's our identifier for him. And they send that back. The document query is really where you start to get into this use case discussion that you're talking about, Jim, relative to, I've got a patient in an ambulance and they've passed out twice in the past 3 weeks. Do I need 7 years worth of data out of this patient? And do I need progress nurses' notes from a hospital system? No. So how you develop and implement your secondary query, your document query, really starts to get very focused into your use case, right? The way Zen tackles this is we have what we call a client adapter, and then we have elements that you can use to create archetypes of transactions where we can say, oh, we've got a level of service of E, emergent care, your your ambulance use case, right? We have another level of service called P, point of care. Point of care for one entity may be, I want 24 months worth of data and I only want a summarization episode of note and a discharge summary. Well, you set those parameters in that document query and they go out to the network, and the network gives you back data associated with those parameters. The parameters are data time frame, start, stop, document types across the LOINC enumeration that exists. There's about 60 document types supported kind of holistically across the network. And so it really, you have to manage that from your application stack or your integration technology, right? And so with Stargate and Zen, we put that in what we call client adapter layer, where you could end up with 4 or 5 integrations that have use cases like this that are defined for various purposes. You've got an SIU appointment that comes into your system. The appointment's 2 weeks from now. You want to go query every provider in a 250-mile radius, and you want data for 10 years. You're an oncologist. You want to see stuff for a long window. You want to be looking at this patient's history for a long period of time.
Exactly.
You could have an integration that does that explicitly. Then you could have another integration that says, we got somebody in the ER. We don't want to sit around and wait for 100 documents. We need 3 months, 6 months worth of data. We want to see what's transpired recently. Oh, here's a med. Here's a brand new med they gave this patient a month ago on a discharge from a foot wound.
Right.
That's the culprit, right? So you could have a whole nother integration that says, just give me discharge summaries, episode of notes, and do it for 6 months. And that.
Yeah, so the IHE profile that this is all based on supports all of those characteristics, but you got to tell it what you're looking for. And we're going to cover more of the characteristics of how we do some of that in future episodes.
Yes.
You also mentioned, again, another teaser for the next one of the next episodes that we put together here. You just mentioned, I want to query every provider within a 250-mile radius. So I'm assuming that it has geolocation services all embedded in it, and you just say, hey, and it finds data wherever it needs it, whenever it needs it.
Well, we wished it did, and it'd be nice if it did.
Right.
There are some aggregate responders. So there are some folks like Athena and ECW in NextGen that, and there are some hospital systems that are moving to this, where you can query one endpoint and you can get information and data from their entire system. That's helpful, but then there are thousands and thousands of other endpoints that are one-to-one. And that one-to-one paradigm is where the geofencing falls apart and you don't get the details you might need. And you know, we've built solutions to help clients do that based upon state, network. It could be radius from a particular address or, you know, latitude and longitude kind of a scenario.
Right.
There are some folks that are talking about doing it. There are some folks that do what's called a record locator service. You know, all of those things have, you know, fee for service typically associated with them. And record locator services are only as good as the data you have.
Right.
So our approach has been, you create your own record locator service and use the features of Zen and the network to do that for you.
It is it's a functionality that does make the service much more effective than just querying at the busiest time of the day and saying, hey, across the nation, do you know who Joe Blow is? It is not very effective that way. So we're going to talk more about some of the details of how do you get that to be more effective. And as you might imagine, as the national networks, QHENs become more and more used, which is a great thing for us all, that problem becomes more exacerbated because there is more traffic, there's more data in there, but there's more traffic that you got to cut through to find it. And record locator services and other characteristics will be changing, I presume, as we grow over the next handful of years as well.
Yes. Yeah. You know, one of the interesting things is that much of the network traffic is driven off of keyboard strokes or events in EMRs. And so what happens organically at 7 a.m. across the healthcare system?
Right.
People start walking into intake desks. And so we can see the traffic patterns just hockey stick at about 7 a.m. Eastern through, you know, probably 2 or 3 Pacific off the charts. And, you know, there's a lot of ways that can be problematic, especially when you start talking about emergent care situations, you know, real-time needs. So we've got some other ideas wrapped around our solutions to solve some of that, to get away from that keystroke-based workflow.
Fantastic. And again, to everybody that that has been in attendance or is listening to this as a recording, we encourage you to bring your questions, think about what it is that we're talking about here. While we do talk about our solution from time to time at Zen, because that's relevant to us, this is not intended to be a sales tool in any regard. It's supposed to be helping educate people about the characteristics and the capabilities of healthcare data exchange. That rising tide lifts all boats, and we're firm believers with regard to that. And in closing here, I want to thank Ron. Ron and I are going to do this multiple times, but this has been very informative overall on how to do this. We will be promoting this more so that we get other people involved. We are going to request people that represent the national networks to join us for some of these discussions, as well as competitors to us, like I said before, and certainly clients and others that have a vested interest in making sure that they understand what it is that is this healthcare data exchange, and how do we do it effectively, safely, and help patients get better treatment here going forward. Hope you found that this is worthwhile. We are going to be very respectful of everybody's time. And so we're going to end it on time. Thank you for joining us, and we will talk with you next time.